and admitting everyone now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this very, at least, sunny afternoon in Brussels. And wherever you are, hopefully also sunny weather. My name is Jasmijn Slootjes. I'm the Deputy Director at the Migration Policy Institute Europe. Welcome to today's webinar, After the Vote, the EU Talent Pool in Europe's Labour Mobility Strategy. This webinar is organized as part of the Global Strategy for Skills, Migration and Development Horizon project. And that's quite a mouthful, so we say GS4S in short, and it's funded by the EU. First, a few logistics and housekeeping notes before we really get started. In case of any technical problems, please reach out to Abigail Goldfarb. Her email will be posted on the screen shortly. And there will be a Q&A at the end of the webinar, so please submit your questions via the Teams Q&A function on your screen. So try not to use the chat and really stick to the Q&A function. But if it happens, we'll try to still pull those questions into our Q&A. You can already start that throughout the presentations and the conversations, and then we'll address them at the end. With this logistics out of the way, let's dive into the content. And let's first start a little bit with the context of today's webinar. So what we've all been hearing about is demographic decline. And within this context of demographic decline, Europe has been facing labor shortages across sectors and across skill levels. And this is hurting Europe's competitiveness and also ability to achieve big, important goals like the green transition. Just a small example, nearly 4 in 5 SMEs reported shortages in qualified workers. And this impacts many different sectors. Just in healthcare, a very critical sector, the WHO expects a shortage of 4.1 million workers in the EU by 2030, and this is fast approaching. Third country nationals could, through labor mobility, play an essential role in filling these gaps. And these developments and challenges have not fallen upon deaf ears. The EU and also many member states have been increasingly taking active steps to face these goals. From the EU talent partnerships, the recent EU visa strategy that was announced, also the Union of Skills, and many other actions, there's a strategy that's developing to tackle these labor shortages. One of the tools that is being developed is the EU Talent Pool, and that's what we're focusing on here today. The EU Talent Pool is an EU-wide online platform for international recruitment. Last week, on the 10th of March, the European Parliament approved the regulation establishing this EU Talent Pool. So what are the objectives that it's trying to achieve? The EU Talent Pool aims to promote the EU as a destination by attracting foreign workers and to tackle labor shortages. And it does so through addressing some of the main challenges related to international recruitment. And this is mostly bringing employers and workers together. So on this platform, employers will be able to post jobs, and third country job seekers at all skill levels will be able to post their profiles. There will be an automated matching tool, and there will also be a search function to make it easier for them to find each other. On top of this, there will also be information provided on recruitment, migration, qualification recognition, but also rights. Which can be very important in navigating, I think, the very complex systems across the EU and the different member states. So with this new regulation voted through, this webinar aims to reflect on the economic, legal, and political context, to look ahead and reflect on successful implementation and what lessons we have to have successful implementation. And we'll also try to zoom out and reflect a bit on future priorities for the EU skills agenda. To reflect on these questions with me today, I'm very honored to introduce 3 speakers. First, we have Anna Strolenberg, who is member of the European Parliament from the Netherlands, from the Volt political party. Also with us today is Mauro Testaverde, who's the senior economist at the World Bank. And we also have here Tesseltje de Lange, who's director of the Center for Migration Law at Radboud University. So thank you so much for all 3 of you here. I have a few questions for all of you, and I would like to get started with you, Mauro, also reflecting on you being a senior economist and kind of going into the economic background. So could you tell us a little bit more about the broader economic and development case for the EU talent pool?
Absolutely. Yasmin, thanks for the invitation to MPI Europe, and great opportunity to be here and share my thoughts on that. So I just wanted to build on what you said at the beginning, and just give some numbers. So the World Bank is increasingly working on the topic of migration, and we have estimated that in the next 15 years, as many as 1.2 billion people in developing countries will enter working age. And for them, only about 400 million jobs would be created. This means that there will be a lot of people from developing countries looking for jobs that are not currently present in the country they are from. At the same time, our estimates suggest that in high-income countries and upper-middle-income countries, there will be shortages of workers, accounting for about 750 million workers. And to fill these shortages, we have simulated different policy measures, and activating the existing workforce or intra-EU mobility will not be sufficient. So migration really becomes a natural strategy to fill these shortages. And in this context, platforms like the talent pool will be crucial to facilitate migration. But why is that? Why a matching platform at the EU level might be useful, and why government interventions in these areas are needed? So when we talk with counterparts in both origin and destination countries, what we hear is from employers that it's extremely difficult to find qualified workers. To find workers, then they need to go to recruitment agencies. They often don't have visibility about the skills, the training that people have, and so this becomes very costly and inefficient. At the same time, when we talk with workers in origin countries, we hear that for them, usually migration is a very difficult strategy to pursue. So they either need to go to recruitment agencies that charge high fees, or they just need to follow suggestions on friends or relatives that come to specific countries. So this makes the whole process very inefficient. Considering the number of vacancies that I mentioned at the beginning, the need for workers, also the EU needs to step up the game in terms of attractiveness. So there are a lot of countries around the world that are competing for talent, for skilled workers. So making it easier for job seeker, making the EU attractive as a destination for skilled workers become a priority. And in this sense, the talent pool as unified platform really can simplify the job and reduce cost for both job seekers and for employers. And so can really introduce a recruitment process which is more transparent, more structured, and then can lead to more efficient jobs matching. So I'll stop here for now.
Thank you so much, Mauro. So also those very stark statistics that you're sharing, and also, yeah, reflecting on the role this plays in this, what they sometimes call the global war for talent or global competition for talent, that it's trying to make it more attractive. So from this more economic a bit background, I'd like to shift also a little bit to the political context, and we have the excellent person in the room for that. So I'd like to shift my attention to Anna, and like to hear a little bit more about the political context. So Anna, during the negotiations on the EU talent pool, some of the more ambitious provisions did not make it into the final text because they lacked sufficient support. Could you maybe briefly walk us through the main elements that were watered down or removed in the political discussions, and what this tells us about this current balance of power and political sensitivities around legal migration at EU level?
Yes, of course, and thank you for this question. So what is maybe good to know in the start is that my colleague Damian Beuselager, who is from Volt, in the last mandate handed in a pilot project, the talent pool. And then the commission was so enthusiastic that they said, we're not going to make it a pilot project, we're going to make it turn it into a regulation. So we have spent hours and hours and hours coming up with a lot of creative ideas, not me, but my colleague as well. And unfortunately, a lot of those more innovative ideas did not make it to the final regulation. Because what you could see is that during these negotiations within the parliament, the other members from other parties were enthusiastic as long as we discussed that it would be a matching platform. As soon as we went into simplifying visa procedures or adding administrative support for people who arrive in the EU, or talk about language courses, there it would become difficult. We saw this coming from the member states as well. A matching platform was wanted, but not more than that. Then we said, if we want a matching platform, it has to be very attractive, very user-friendly, and better than LinkedIn. Because why not use LinkedIn if that is easier accessible? So that's the ideas that we came up with. Maybe some concrete ideas that we wanted to include. First of all, what we see, we focus those on what are the difficulties that people coming from outside of Europe coming here are experiencing. One is the validation of skills. We thought that the talent pool could be kind of a test case of how you can see how your skills can be recognized, maybe not officially, but can be validated within the EU. So it's easier to find a job that matches your educational level. What we also wanted to do is open up the platform for service providers. So for companies that want to offer trainings like upskilling trainings. So people immediately know, okay, maybe I don't fit with this job, but I can level up my skills through this companies. And one of the things we really wanted to include was making sure that people who do get a job get helped with the next steps. So with finding a visa, finding housing, etc. But this didn't include it. Was not included. Then there were some topics that were important for the other groups as well, but the member states were not in favor of. And one is the mandatory versus voluntary nature. So now the talent pool is voluntary, so every member state can decide for themselves if they want to join the talent pool, yes or no. I think this is a missed opportunity because now it does not become a European-wide platform. It is only for a few countries available. And we said we want for the whole of Europe to attract talent, not just for a few countries. So I think it's a missed opportunity. One thing that kind of made it in, which was a priority for the parliament, was accelerated migration procedures. So now a country, if they have a certain gap on the labor market, the people that they want to attract, they may offer accelerated immigration procedures. So this is a sort of win, but it's a may, so it's not an obligation. I can talk a lot more about the different initiatives, but I think for now, this gives an overview of there's an interest in a matching platform, less so still for simplifying procedures or extra procedures.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that because, of course, as the general public, you don't always see all the different ideas that may be going on in the negotiations. And I hear a lot here also what I see from evidence that would be really useful and really impactful in this space. So maybe there's other ways to still implement these ideas in the future. And I'm looking forward to discussing further like the broader context. Heading now to Tesseltje. Shifting a bit from the political more to the legal context, I'm quite curious to hear from you whether the final talent pool framework provides a sufficiently rights-based approach for third country workers, or do you see important gaps? And also just curious to reflect a bit on this broader legal context that this fits in.
Yeah, thank you, Yasmin, for that question. And actually, Anna already mentioned one very important legal issue, so to say. This is an EU regulation, and in general, that means that it is directly applicable in all member states. But here there's the exception that it is only applicable in those member states that choose to participate. So that makes the legal application of this instrument dependent on who wants to join, which member state wants to join, meaning that one of the main things that Maro mentioned, saying like the EU is falling behind and the EU needs to step up its game, you can question to what extent this is an EU instrument because of that voluntary participation. So that's one thing which I agree with Anna is in a way a missed opportunity to make it an EU thing. Now, legally speaking, as said, it is a platform. It is not an entry scheme for labor migrants. So you need to see it in the total picture, which is often called a patchwork of EU labor migration legislation, which has the single permit directive to set procedures and rights for workers. There are some rights, well, maybe not rights specifically, but there is, of course, in the talent pool regulation, there's an important paragraph on the rights to information, listing the rights that people have based on other instruments. So not per se based on this instrument, but it's good to flag again that they have these rights and to oblige the member states that participate to inform the job seekers of these rights. So that, because I mean, from research, we know people who arrive in the EU, they start working, but they're not fully aware of their rights, and that gives problems. So I think that's a win, that there's now a clear obligation, guys. These people need to be informed before they come and start working. But otherwise, when it comes to getting the visa, getting the residence permit, single permit for work, you need to go to other instruments, the single permit or the blue card, if they would qualify for that. Interestingly, not entry for traineeships, for instance. If I'm not mistaken, that was not part of, although it was suggested to make the talent pool also relevant for people looking for a traineeship. That was deleted. So that directive on student researchers and trainees is not a relevant legal framework, or the national legal frameworks. So, and that means, again, you're back at the national level. So I think it's a good structure, it's a good framework, but when you talk about migrant worker rights, you still need to take a look at the bigger picture. There's one thing that I found really interesting, and this is actually a question maybe going back to Anna, because I couldn't follow what had happened with this amendment, which is the question on when to perform a labor market test. Because what we did not mention yet is that the regulation comes with a long list, 41 or something, of occupations of which there is a shortage in the EU. And the European Commission, with the member states participating, will set that list once in a while, and the member states can have their own lists. But I thought it was really good to say, once you've uploaded a vacancy as a member state saying, okay, we need people with these skills, and you find people, then you do not let them go through a full labor market test again. You've already said we need people with these skills. And that was, to me, I think that was something that was in the last stages of the negotiations, whether you can still do a labor market test after there's a match, or whether that clearly is something that needs to happen before you actually upload the vacancy, so that you don't bother employers and workers in a later stage with labor market tests, which can be quite cumbersome and time consuming, and will make it far less attractive to come through this instrument than if those would be waived. So that's just a couple of notes on things that stand out from the rights perspective, looking at this instrument.
Thank you so much, Tesseltje. And I think maybe the next speakers can, in their answers, also reflect on if they know a little bit more about this. But yeah, of course, we just had the vote last week, but then now, after all these negotiations, we're going to shift towards implementation. Mauro, based on the World Bank's experience with international jobs matching and also the evidence base for similar platforms around the world, what lessons stand out that we could use to implement the EU talent pool as it moves from design to implementation? And maybe you can also reflect a little bit more specifically on some of the pitfalls to avoid, and also what principles have proven to be successful for implementing these systems in practice.
Absolutely, thanks, Jasmine. And just for the benefit of those who are connected who do not work out, who don't know how the work of the World Bank is structured, we will usually accompany counterparts country with either technical assistance on the design of a platform like this one or other development project, or providing financial assistance, in some cases both. So we have a priority on jobs, and so intervention like this one that try to remove barriers to accessing jobs for people who need jobs are the type of project that we do. Now, we work both on matching platform when it comes to domestic labor market, and increasingly we'll also be looking at international matching platform. I think that some of the principles really are common across the two types of platforms. And I think there are three main characteristics that determine the success of these tools. The first is for this platform to be reliable, so having information that can be trusted. The second is to have information which is relevant, so offering services that actually are what the different users need. And the third point that kind of builds a bit on what was mentioned before is to be efficient. So nobody wants to access tools that are very complicated to use, that take a lot of time to actually lead to the desired results. So what does this mean in practice? So from the work that we do around the world, and we've been working on this in Latin America, so in Argentina, for instance, or in the Gulf, in Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Korea. So what we see is that what is really relevant for matching platforms is to ensure a sufficient volume of information. So there needs to be enough vacancies, and there needs to be a sufficient number of job seekers, because otherwise there is no matching to be done. And it could sound surprising, but actually this is an important step and is a hard one. So outreach and marketing are fundamental to get the platform started. Otherwise, not many people will use them. It's important. In the resolution and in general in the documents that I read, there is a lot of focus on what can be done to support SME and employers, and this is a very important step. So how to assist businesses that are not used to international recruitment. This is a very important step. I think that equally important is how to think of how to attract job seekers. It's not obvious that job seeker will access the platform. Sometimes it could be digital barriers, but in some other cases, it's just lack of trust and lack of knowledge of the tool. So how to partner with countries of origin, with trusted partners in country of origin, to make sure that job seekers can actually input their information. This is something very important because it's not obvious, and also it's a first step. After registering in the platform, it's also important to make sure that the job seekers are active, that they actually check the platform, that they can go back, they can use the platform to the best of their interest. So there is an important role of thinking of how to support and partnering with country of origin. The second important step is related to the quality of information. So who is going to do the verification of the vacancies? And here I understand that there are focal points for each country that are going to check the vacancies, but same, checking the profile of the job seekers, making sure that these profiles are actually reliable. And as it was mentioned by Anna before, linking to verification of qualification. Now we know that, for instance, in Saudi Arabia, the Kiwa platform, which is used by the Saudi government, has the possibility to embed links to testing centers, and then so skills can be verified. I think this is an important step, finding a way to partner with agencies, again, in origin countries that can provide some form of certification or qualification would be very important. So this is a step which is not to forget. So overall, what I would say is that when it comes to implementation, what is very important is to think of how to ensure that the platform immediately becomes something that employers and job seekers want to use. So branding the platform, making sure that there is a sufficient volume of information will become an important priority. And integrating them with systems that can help the verification of information, a national system that can allow that will be an important step. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Mauro. And I think there's a lot of lessons to learn for effective implementation there. In the interest of time, as this conversation is incredibly interesting, I'll bundle the questions for Tesseltje, because I wanted to ask her to reflect a bit on what needs to happen next to ensure the impact of the EU talent pool. And I think Mauro already reflected a little bit on this, and then especially reflecting on lessons that we could learn from this global strategy for skills project that you're leading and that we're also part of. Very curious to hear.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was triggered indeed by what Mauro just said about testing centers and activities in third countries. And I think one thing I want to flag is that your previous question was about what rights are in the instrument. And the right to fair recruitment is one. And one of the elements of fair recruitment is that the migrant does not pay, but the employer pays. But of course, if we become reliant on testing centers outside the EU, it'll be very difficult to know whether they ask for certain fees for people who want their qualifications recognized. So there's a gray zone between what is still decent to ask of a worker who's interested in an international career to pay themselves, and where the concept of the decent recruitment kicks in, and where that would not be right to do. And combined recognition of qualifications, the role of private actors, recruitment and migration policy are different policy fields. And that's exactly what we do in the GS4S project. We engage with multiple policy fields to try to understand what is the best way to make something we haven't mentioned explicitly that, but to make EU talent partnerships work, which is the collaboration between the EU and third countries, again, going there, to skill the people we need for the future, because it's not just the EU who needs people. Countries of origin will also need people with skills and jobs for them to make a living. So the idea of the talent partnerships is to work on that skilling together. And like the talent pool, both are very much reliant on member state engagement. And I think I agree with Mauro that scaling is key, but it's very difficult still with the talent partnerships to actually have them come to scale. And one of the elements that we see is the skills recognition, and not just a formal stamp, but then also going to your question on what's it like on the ground when you would implement this. We need employers to engage with this instrument and with the candidates that will come through the talent pool. And from our research, we see that employers are still very hesitant to work with migrant workers. For instance, if you look at beneficiaries of international protection inside the EU, their opportunities to find work are still way behind to what would be ideal. International students transitioning into jobs at their skill level is a challenge. And fascinatingly, both are not part of the talent pool. So if you're inside the EU, you cannot upload your CV to find a job somewhere else in the EU. And Mauro said at the beginning, intra-EU mobility is not going to save us. Well, it's definitely not going to save us if we don't use the talent that we already have to move around. So there's work from the GS4S project that shows that these are limitations in the current system, and limitations that I foresee that in the implementation of the talent pool will still be there, or will come to the fore again when we start seeing who participates and what are the challenges, what do they complain about, what is not working. Well, then it will be these similar topics that will come forward. And of course, we are looking forward to help with research, figure out where exactly is the hurdle that might need to be overcome, and what ways can those hurdles be overcome to make the talent pool a useful instrument in this respect.
Great. Thank you so much, Tesseltje. And I think some really important advice, but also some cautionary words of things that may not work out, and that facilitating recruitment is not enough, and that more needs to be done. And that's something we'll definitely be focusing on at the end. But before doing so, I want to reflect still a little bit more on impact. And for that, I'd like to go to Anna. So now that the Parliament has adopted this EU talent pool, what will you see as really the key success indicators of this new instrument?
Yes, several points. Maybe also because Tessa asked the question before about, I'll be very brief, the labor market test. The labor market test has to be done before vacancies are uploaded. So first we do the test, then vacancies are uploaded, so you don't have to go through it again afterwards. That is good. And the other point Tesseltje raised was about making the talent pool available for third country nationals already residing in the EU. Something we also advocated for, but unfortunately did not make it. But it doesn't make sense for you that only when you're outside you can apply. The key success indicators are, well, what I want to share about this is very aligned about with what Mauro just said before. So I'll be very brief here. The first part is, of course, participation, which is the key. If member states do not participate, then the tool won't work, because then the national platforms that are already there will be more attractive, easier to use. The user friendliness is the main aspect, and we have seen with the current platform of EURES for people within the EU, unfortunately, it's not a very user-friendly platform, and people don't use it. So my fear is that this will happen again. So we really, really have to invest in making it extremely user-friendly. Therefore, we also propose some measures how to improve the algorithm that matches people. Unfortunately, also did not end up in there. And the information provision as well. I do think I'm happy that we have it included, because this could be a real added benefit for people. Because right now, you have to go through 27 different websites, all in different languages, and know about the visa procedures. That is so complicated. So now the fact that we can structure this in one platform, I do think that that could be one of the main successes that can make a real change. What is important is that we do have those safeguards still, that we make people aware of where they can go if there's when they have complaints, that there will be a list of companies that exploit people that will be excluded from the talent pool. Because this is what I hear a lot. People are also afraid that this can potentially lead to more exploitation of labor migrants. But this is something we want to avoid. And I do think that this would actually create more transparency and more overview. And then adding these safeguards, I think it could create a better situation for labor migrants. Maybe one thing to still mention is that all the things that I mentioned that we wanted to add, the Commission in their visa strategy, they also gave some guidelines and advices for member states, and most of them are included. So you can see that there's a willingness from the European Commission to work on this, but it's the member state where we have to do most of the work.
Yeah, thank you so much for pointing that out, because the simplification of visa procedures, etc., that's all been mentioned in the EU visa strategy. So it's good to see it's coming out there. But yeah, it's clear that at the member state level, there's maybe a bit of hesitancy to work on this. So that's definitely the next step. This always needs to happen at all different levels. So we had a lot of in-depth conversation about the EU talent pool. I also want to zoom out a little bit and take a little step back, still reflecting about the EU talent pool, of course, but also this broader skill strategy and how we're facing skill shortages across. And first, I'd like to get to Mauro. So how does the EU talent pool fit in the broader policy strategy of the EU on labor mobility and addressing skill shortages, for example, such as the talent partnerships?
Yes, indeed, the talent pool is one of the different instruments that are mentioned in the new Migration and Asylum Pact. And I think that one instrument is not going to be sufficient to achieve the vision, which is laid out in the pact. And here you can think of the talent pool as the platform that, again, needs the underlying information to do the match. And the talent partnership really work in this direction. So identifying occupations and training specialties that are of common interest for talent partnership countries, origin countries, and EU destination countries, to then invest in training to prepare workers. At that point, you have a pipeline that can feed the talent pool to make this matching. Now, it was mentioned before that, however, talent partnership are still at the pilot stage. So how to make sure that everything moves together. So we talked about the importance of having enough information, enough users of the talent pool, but at the same time, the talent partnership is still at a small scale. So here, what we are trying to do increasingly at the World Bank is to think about to streamline this type of program, like talent partnership, into standard development program that we run in origin countries. This means that if the World Bank is running, for example, a project to support training in some countries of origin, can these programs that usually at large scale be adjusted to then feed the away track, so feed migration that can happen as envisioned by talent partnership. So in a way, the approach that we're trying to support is stopping to look at migration in isolation, but thinking about migration as part of the human capital development strategy of the countries of origin, and as part of the strategy, some workers will go abroad. So this will be this is an approach we're trying to take, and hopefully that can help talent partnership to reach scale. But also there is another initiative that I think is very relevant, and is the pilot legal gateway that we start in India. And earlier I talked about the support that some job seekers may need to actually use the talent pool. And I'm just wondering whether the gateway can also provide this support, can really help job seeker access the talent pool, provide the information that are needed, and also provide the complementary services that we have all discussed so far. So is it possible to think about these offices as a way to facilitate mobility and matching? And then also a point that was made earlier is related to the starting point being the shortages and shortages occupation at the EU level. I think this is an important step. So it's moving from a reaction to migration, an approach to migration which is reactive, to an approach to migration which is structured and is based on data evidence. So the production of this occupation shortage list can really inform future planning, can be based on what is seen from the data, but also from discussion with employers. So this really anchor migration into a broader labor mobility and labor shortage filling strategy. So I think in a way, all the different pieces are important to achieve this vision. We just need to make sure that all of them are supported at the same time, because sequencing, if one piece is ready before the other, unfortunately, the whole strategy can be undermined. So I think it's important to have all these pieces in mind. That's up here.
Great. Thank you so much for sketching a bit how these different puzzle pieces fit together. And yeah, also, of course, thinking about like there's been different digital tools launched by the EU, but sometimes they take many more years to implement than thought of. Of course, this is building of the EURES system, so maybe this won't take as much time, but yeah, it needs to go in parallel with the talent partnerships. But really interesting to see how you draw the linkages across these different pieces. So that's, of course, the current strategy. I'd like to also encourage a little bit more big horizon, far away reflections. And for that, I'd like to go to Anna to reflect a little bit on, according to her, where the most pressing policy gaps are in the EU's overall strategy on labor mobility and tackling skill shortages. And where do you think that the EU should focus its efforts moving forward? So what are really the priority areas to focus on in the coming years and maybe decades?
So I can look forward, but then you might expect big plans, but also sometimes think it can be rather easy. Because one of the things we should focus on is simplifying visa procedures. Right now, it is very hard for a person to obtain a visa. It can take ages before you get one, and they're complicated procedures. So I don't think that in all member states we have visa procedures that are especially fit for the digital age. If we would digitalize a lot of the procedures, it will become a lot easier for a person to obtain a visa in the Netherlands, or sorry, the Netherlands and everywhere in Europe. I'm from the Netherlands. Second point is about mobility of third country nationals within within the EU to work in other countries. Because right now you obtain a visa for one country and then it's you cannot use it in another country. Of course, there are some exceptions, but it's difficult to take the rights that you have from one country to another. We have been working on this in what we call the long-term residence directive. However, you see this is also stuck because member states are not a big fan of this. So we should really work on creating this understanding that if we want to be competitive as an EU, we should not compete with each other, but make it easier for people to reside and work everywhere in Europe and not just in one country. A third one is definitely the skills and qualification recognition, which we have talked about before. And another part that we should not forget is integration. What I see happening right now especially in the negotiations about the budget for migration management, is that there's a lot of focus on our borders of Europe and cooperations with third countries, but more on the focus of returns and less on integration. If we want this transition to go successful, we have to also know that there's a cultural shift needed. Municipalities need money to welcome people that come to our union. They find housing, etc. So a lot of the work is also done by municipalities. So let's make sure that there's sufficient funding for municipalities to do their job. And right now, I see that we're moving into the other direction. So yes, slowly we're waking up and knowing that we need to compete in this race for talent, but then we don't connect it to execution on the local level. So the narrative matters as well. As I said, what is the narrative that we're focusing on? My hope is now that the Commission dares to put this as a priority, something might change. Someone has to take the lead in this. So I think the Commission is doing a good job. Spain is doing a good job, but let's see how we can help other member states to work on this narrative. I am grateful for all the initiatives that are now taking place, about Choose Europe, European Innovation Act. However, I do also want to say that it is sometimes a bit complicated because now there are so many initiatives which might also make it more complicated instead of simplifying everything. So we should also be wary of what concrete steps, easy steps can we take to improve the situation.
Thank you so much, Anna. And I think I really like to echo what you're saying, because I think there's sometimes a tendency to announce new flashy things and initiatives, while sometimes just very simple tweaks to what we already have can have the most bang for their buck and have the biggest impact. So that's really interesting that you mentioned that. And also that you mentioned integration. I mean, I work on integration myself, so it's one of the topics I focus on, but something we haven't reflected yet is also the retention of those that we attract. We want to make Europe attractive, but we know that the retention rates are sometimes half of that of local workers. And we know that integration, including the integration of spouses, can almost double the retention. So this is really something to invest in, and it's also very important for the social cohesion of Europe, etc. So I think, very important point to also add that on top of everything else, what you said. Great. So we had a lot of discussion and reflection, and I saw many questions come in from the Q&A box. So let me go to the first question, which came from Jose Fabio Jimenez, who has a question for Anna. And the question is, what would be the potential linkages between the talent pool and the EURES platform? So that's the European Employment Services platform. Is it expected that data and systems will be interoperable at some point? Will they be linked up? So that's one question. I'll leave it out. I'll also right away mention a few other questions, and we can kind of go around and reflect on these. Then we received a long list of questions from a a team from GIZ that's present. So I'll pick a few and then we'll try to get back to you. We'll share the questions with the speakers after the event. So maybe you can follow up in a meeting or share insights via email. And one of the questions is that which EU member states are actually planning to participate in the EU talent pool, and what are the main reasons for some member states to not be participating? So a very important question. And another question is, how do you EU member states intend to integrate their existing national job portals into the EU talent pool? Which is a good question because, right, there's many portals that already exist. For example, Work in Austria, they also have a matching, they also have a platform. So yeah, how does the EU one link to the national level ones? And then having a broader question, and then we'll get to some answer sessions. Does the EU talent pool regulation and later the tool envisage to include, beyond the job matching, some information or service already established whether candidates and the corresponding job offer would qualify for certain pathways or permits in the EU? For example, salary requirements, language requirements, so that there's already kind of a pre-check on which visa pathways would be applicable. So leaving those questions here, there's many more. So maybe a first round of answers through, maybe I'll start with Anna and then you can take the floor, whoever wants to come in. And then I'll have another round.
Thank you. Let me check what some of the answers I have, not all of them, about US. I know that the Commission is planning to use the same technology or an algorithm, but it wants to create a new platform. So I don't think that they will be interoperable, also because there's data from for people who apply for the new platform, and are they able to share it with the other platform? I'm not sure about this because that also concerns a lot of GDPR matters. So yes, same system but different platform. About which member states wanted to join. There were maybe Tessage or someone else knows that there were around 10 in the beginning. I'm not entirely sure anymore. Or less or more. No, Tessage, do you know? No, you also don't.
No, sorry, I don't have the last count. Actually, it's something that's still moving. I guess also with new governments coming forward, you get new positions on it. So
it really depends indeed on the approach of the government. Some, for them, it's not controversial in the country, or they just really need people. Others, where they have, especially more right-wing governments, fear that they cannot be in favor because it will put the frame on them that they are opening borders for everyone to come in. I know, for example, my country, the Netherlands, was against, but now they have a bit more of a open-minded government, and they're leaning more towards yes. One thing they were afraid of is that there would be posting of workers. So someone hired in Poland would then go to the Netherlands. What we established in the talent pool is that every vacancy has to state where the job is. So you immediately know to which country you're going to avoid this posting of workers. About the pathways, like which visa could you get? This is not specifically included, but what we then there did is that every vacancy has to indicate what is your salary level you will get, where will you be based. So this can give you the information. And then once you get the job, all information is provided, but this is general information. We wanted for the national context point to actively help you to assess which visa you should get, but the member states were not in favor because it would require a lot of people, a lot of FTAs for people to fill this job. So it will be general information. Let me see. I think this is it for now. Maybe others have something to add.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the questions in the Q&A box, and the questions revolve around the value added of the talent pool and the risk for duplication, and what do really business get out of it. And something to keep in mind is that the EU member states are not all at the same level of advancements when we come to recruiting internationally. And then I can give you an example of countries like Croatia or Poland, Bulgaria, Romania that are experiencing increasing level of immigration. They're not usually on the map as the main immigration countries in the EU because they're not, but they are increasingly experiencing shortages. And for employers from these countries, a tool like the talent pool can be very important. But even in bigger countries, SMEs do not have the network to recruit internationally so easily. So having one platform that one can trust and then is providing information which is validated can really help. So I think it's important to think about the diversity of countries and the diversity of employers. And now an instrument like this can be beneficial. Now, for there was also a question about the additional services. So there is, I see that at least in the plan, there are plans to include a lot of information on labor regulation, immigration law. There is also the idea to help job seekers create their own profile using digital tools to create their profiles. So I think that these are all features that can help the utilization from both employer and job seekers. Now, one point that I want to re-emphasize is that the feature can be there, but there needs to be some support for both the SME and the job seeker to utilize the platform. I think, for instance, we've seen in countries like Argentina, in which for the national platform, AI tools have really been helpful, but only when they've been accompanied by the support of PES, Public Employment Service staff. So this is something to keep in mind. Something else that I didn't have the chance to say before, and it's maybe to add to what Anna said at the end, was related to measure of success. So in the resolution, there are a list of indicators that are going to be tracked. Something that I would suggest to track as well is retention of workers after a certain period. We have done an evaluation of a matching platform for international job seekers in Korea, and what we saw is that for permits that are up to 3 years, actually after 1 or 2 years, a lot of separations take place. So even if you match at the beginning, maybe the employment contract is not going to be kept up to the end. And what we saw is that a lot of the matching were done based on the preferences expressed by the job seekers. What we realized is that sometimes other factors are better predictors of better matches. So the preferred sector, the preferred job is not necessarily the best predictor. So there are some other factors to keep in mind. And maybe this is something to for the talent pool to take into account when evaluation are carried out. I'll stop here.
Desiree, would you like to come in as well?
Yeah, of course. Following the questions, I think a lot of them are still at a practical level where I wouldn't necessarily have the answer right away. One thing that I do like very much from the GIZ people is, of course, that the Germans have these language centers across the globe where people can learn German, and that makes them a lot more easily integrated into the workplace once arriving. And I know from a lot of conversations that we've been having about the topic that people say, like, why should we still want everybody to speak 27 different languages? Why isn't English good enough for the job? And then if you look at the shortage occupations listed, that's a challenge. A lot of them are concerned with care work, for instance. Now, some care work maybe can be done in English, but definitely we keep hearing back from the field that is not so easily done. So what I think is and that also goes to your earlier question, Yasmin, like what is the way forward? Combining that and Anna's comment that we focus a lot on border control actually and keeping people out instead of seeing people for the potential that they bring. I like to say that we should focus more on building campuses than building camps, and that building campuses, having EU campuses across the globe in potential countries of origin, where language training, skills development so it's a combination of talent partnerships, but it can be at different levels, that could be a very good way to have on the ground agents available to support at the country of origin end, so that indeed people can upload their CVs, etc., and that they don't have to pay brokers to do that with them, but that it is an established entity that is available there. So I think that's a very important one on the quality assurance on language training that is required. And that is very important for employers to know that people will have some knowledge of the language and preparedness to learn. But it also calls for the member states to talk with employers about their intercultural way of working, of job crafting, instead of, I mean, this system is really like the ISCO code and it has to be this job. But of course, we know that job crafting is happening to address skill shortages better. And that would be also a way forward, I think, following from this, is that we don't stick to these rigid job descriptions, but that employers try to work with what they've got and who they can get. And this can be part of the source of the people they need in the future.
Great. I think time is quickly running out, and we have a really rich Q&A. The speakers can also reply directly in the Q&A box if you wish so, but we can also share these questions with you after the event, and we can also get back to those as well. So we'll try to coordinate on this. If you would like to get an answer, do send an email to Abigail. She'll again post her email in the chat box so you can easily find her, so we can get back to you and have your contact details. As time is running out, I think unfortunately we don't have more time for further questions, but I think some interesting questions that I still saw that I think would be interesting to point out is that I saw also some reflections on the how this may impact the ecosystem of intermediaries, and will this change the business case for them, because maybe the talent pool will kind of take over some of this in-between work or providing information. So I think that's a very interesting question around that. A lot of questions around also timeline and very specific questions around implementation, for example, on what are the different timelines for still joining? Do member states still have access to AMIF funding for implementation if they join a bit later? So very specific questions around the implementation there, and also kind of the linkages between the different policy areas that we've already been discussing today. So thank you so much for these questions. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but we will get back via email to you and try to get most of these answers to you, at least those that are available. I would like to thank the three speakers with us today, Anna, Mauro, and Tesseltje. Really insightful discussion. I think you shared a lot of input, and I think we really got a bit of a 360 view. And I think what is clear to me is that this has now been voted in, but I think impact will really depend also on implementation, and that involves uptake and all the different issues I think that we were discussing. So I think there's still a lot to work on, and I think where our respective expertise and experience can come in handy, hopefully, to make sure it is effective and it does align with the broader strategy. I also still want to do a little shout out for this GS4S project. It's linked here. So if you want to find out more about the findings, the reports, and also see recordings from previous webinars and also the future webinars that we'll be organizing, please check out our website, gs4s.eu. And stay tuned for more. We'll have a final conference in Brussels in October. So do also keep an eye out for that, where you see all the findings of the full project. And for now, just a really big thank you for everyone. And maybe also one small mention. At MPI Europe, we will be organizing specific roundtables on addressing skill shortages one in the tech sector and the other on the health sector. If you're interested in attending and you work on this related to your work, do reach out. We will be very happy to have you there or be in touch with you and learn from your experiences. And this is also part of this broader GS4S project. So for now, a big thank you, and I wish you all a really great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you.